always thought the absolute worst way to die was getting caught in the crossfire of a Boston syndicate turf war. I was wrong. The absolute worst way to die is failing advanced calculus because a mafia heir decided to aggressively redecorate my life 12 hours before the midterm exam. My name is Liam Harrison. Up until this freezing Tuesday evening, my existence at the elite Kingsley University had been a masterclass in staying entirely invisible. I had to be. In a school run by East Coast legacy families, heirs to unspeakable fortunes, and shadowy syndicates, keeping your head down wasn't just advice, it was a survival tactic. It was even more crucial for me because I was an unregistered Omega attending on a full-ride academic scholarship. I took my scent blockers religiously, buried my nose in textbooks, and worked 3 part-time shifts just to ensure my grandmother in Ohio never missed a payment for her care facility. But then, the housing administration made a clerical error. I had returned to my cramped dorm to find my meagre belongings already packed into crisp black boxes. A stern-faced man in an impeccably tailored suit handed me a new keycard. "Penthouse 402, he had said, his voice leaving absolutely no room for argument. Mr. Vance requested a new roommate, Dominic Vance. Just hearing his name sent a shiver down my spine that was equal parts sheer terror and undeniable thrill. Dominic wasn't just the most breathtaking guy on campus, he was the undisputed apex predator of Kingsley. An alpha of the highest pedigree and the heir to the Vance Syndicate, a name whispered with reverence and fear in Boston's underground. For 2 years, I had harboured a completely hopeless, embarrassing crush on him from afar. We had never spoken. I was practically a ghost to him. Or so I thought. When I pushed open the heavy, steel-reinforced door to room 402, the scent hit me first. It was an intoxicating, suffocating blend of dark cedar, rain-slicked pavement, and something dangerously sharp that made my Omega instincts completely short-circuit. The penthouse was a fortress disguised as a luxury suite. Massive, bulletproof windows overlooked the Boston skyline, dark leather furniture filled the living space, and in the centre of the bedroom area sat a single, colossal, king-sized bed. Dominic was leaning against a mahogany desk, dressed in a black turtleneck and dark trousers that clung to his heavily muscled frame. He didn't look up from the leather-bound ledger in his hands immediately. "Close the door, Liam," he commanded softly. His voice was a low, resonant rumble that seemed to echo directly in my chest. My breath hitched. He knew my name. There must be a mistake, I stammered, my voice sounding painfully thin. The administration gave me this key, but there's only one bed. There is no mistake, Dominic interrupted, finally snapping the ledger shut. He stood up, and the sheer physical presence of him seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room. He closed the distance between us with the slow, deliberate steps of a predator cornering its prey. There are whispers in the city, Liam. The rival factions are getting bold. They know you are an unregistered Omega without an Alpha's mark. If I had left you in that unsecured dorm for one more night, you would have been taken. Panic flared in my chest. Taken? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm nobody. You aren't nobody anymore, Dominic stated, his tone flat, stripping away my carefully constructed lie in a single second. He stopped just inches from me, his piercing silver eyes dropping to my neck. You are mine to protect. The door is reinforced steel. Hank and Arthur, my best men, are heavily armed and stationed in the hallway. The only place you are truly safe is right here, in my bed. He waited for the submission. He expected me to tremble, to let my Omega instincts surrender to his overwhelming, dominant cedar scent. He expected me to seek comfort in the terrifying embrace of the city's most dangerous alpha. Instead, a different kind of terror violently hijacked my brain. "Where is my blue backpack?" I gasped, my eyes darting wildly around the room, completely ignoring his intense mafia monologue. Dominic blinked, the lethal intensity in his silver eyes fracturing into pure confusion. What? "My blue backpack!" I shrieked, my natural vanilla scent suddenly spiking, not with fear of assassination, but with the acidic tang of pure academic panic. I dropped to my knees, frantically tearing open one of the crisp black boxes his goons had packed. I have an advanced calculus midterm tomorrow at 8 a.m. Where is my Stewart Calculus 8th edition textbook?
Liam, listen to me,
Dominic growled, crouching down and grabbing my wrists to stop my frantic digging. His pheromones flared, a heavy, commanding weight. There are hitmen actively looking for you. The Petrov family wants to use you to bleed me. You are not going to a calculus class tomorrow. I ripped my hands out of his iron grip, my breathing shallow and erratic. You don't understand. I am on a full-ride scholarship. It is tied to a 3.8 GPA. If I miss that midterm, I fail the class. If I fail the class, I lose the scholarship. And if I lose the scholarship, my grandmother gets kicked out of her medical facility in Ohio. I poked a trembling finger hard into his rock-solid chest. I am more terrified of losing that financial aid than I am of any Russian syndicate, Dominic. Dominic stared at me. The ruthless heir to the Vance Empire, a man who regularly ordered hits before breakfast, was entirely paralysed by the sheer, unadulterated audacity of a broke college student. I scrambled to my feet, finally spotting my battered blue backpack resting on the leather sofa. I practically dove for it, unzipping the front pocket with shaking hands. I pulled out a thick, heavily stapled packet of papers and slapped it down onto the expensive mahogany desk. I am not moving a single inch, I declared, my voice trembling, but my chin raised in absolute defiance. I crossed my arms, refusing to look at the massive king-sized bed. And I am definitely not sleeping in that bed until you sit down, pull out a black pen, and properly fill out all 40 pages of Form 104B, Excused Absence Request for the Dean of Sciences. Dominic looked at the absurdly long administrative document, then slowly looked back at me. For the first time in his life, the apex predator had absolutely no idea what to do with his prey. The silence in Penthouse 402 was so absolute you could hear a pin drop. Or in this case, the heavy, disrespectful thud of my 40-page academic grievance packet hitting the billionaire's mahogany desk. Dominic Vance stared at the stapled papers as if I had just placed a live hand grenade on his workspace. His storm grey eyes slowly dragged from the crisp university letterhead up to my face. I was trembling so violently, my oversized sweater was shaking, my vanilla scent souring with academic terror. But I held my ground. You want me, Dominic started, his voice a dangerously low rumble that made the floorboards vibrate. The head of the Vance Syndicate, to petition the Dean of Sciences for an excused absence. Yes, I squeaked, before clearing my throat to sound firmer. Section C, paragraph 4, explicitly states that any absence during a midterm requires a verified emergency contact's signature and a detailed explanation of the extenuating circumstances. Since you essentially kidnapped me, you are now my extenuating circumstance. Dominic pinched the bridge of his nose. A heavy sigh escaped him, laced with the intoxicating, dominant scent of dark cedar. For a moment, I thought he was going to snap my neck. Instead, he reached into his tailored slacks, pulled out a sleek encrypted radio, and pressed the talk button. Hank, Arthur, get in here, now. Less than 3 seconds later, the heavy reinforced door practically flew off its hinges. 2 massive men in dark tactical suits burst into the room, assault rifles raised and eyes sweeping for threats. Hank, a towering wall of muscle with a scar cutting across his left eyebrow, kept his weapon levelled at the window. Arthur, slightly leaner but moving with the terrifying, silent grace of a coiled viper, flanked the door. Boss? Hank barked, his voice pure gravel. Perimeter breach? Who do we kill? Dominic casually leaned back against the desk, crossing his arms over his chest. He didn't look at them. He kept his intense, burning gaze entirely locked on me. No one, Dominic replied flatly. Put the guns away. I have a new assignment for you both. Sit down at the table. Hank and Arthur exchanged a bewildered look. Slowly, they lowered their weapons, engaging the safeties with sharp, metallic clicks. They awkwardly shuffled over to the small glass dining table in the corner of the room. What's the target, boss? Arthur asked, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. Dominic pointed a beautifully manicured, heavy-ringed finger at the stack of papers. Form 104B. I need it filled out flawlessly by morning. Blue ink only. If I wasn't entirely convinced I was about to lose my scholarship, the sight of two seasoned Mafia hitmen struggling to comprehend a college administration form would have been hysterical. Hank blinked, his scarred face scrunching up in profound confusion. A form? Like, for taxes? Boss, we launder money through the offshore accounts. We don't do this. It's an excused absence request, I interrupted, marching over to the table and slapping a blue ballpoint pen down in front of Hank. The sheer audacity of my own actions was entirely fueled by the adrenaline of a desperate college student. And please, write neatly. The administration office will reject it if they can't read your handwriting. For the next 4 hours, Penthouse 402 transformed into the most terrifying study hall in existence. I paced back and forth behind the two assassins, acting like a strict, neurotic headmaster. Hank, a man who allegedly once dismantled a rival gang with a crowbar, was sweating profusely as he tried to fit his massive handwriting into the tiny boxes on page 12. Arthur had surprisingly pulled a pair of delicate, wire-rimmed reading glasses from his tactical vest, reading through the university's bylaws with the intense, calculating focus of a sniper. Arthur, no, I scolded, pointing over his broad shoulder. You can't write, target is currently under syndicate protection from Russian assassins in the reason box. Just write, severe seasonal influenza. But that's a lie, Arthur stated, matter-of-factly, adjusting his glasses. It creates a verifiable inconsistency. If the dean calls the campus clinic, they won't have a record of your admission. We should just forge a medical certificate from our underground trauma surgeon. I stared at him, my brain stalling. You guys have an underground trauma surgeon? He's very good, Hank chimed in, chewing nervously on the end of his blue pen. Fixed my collarbone last winter. Throughout this entire surreal ordeal, Dominic didn't say a word. He sat on the edge of the massive king-sized bed, his long legs stretched out, watching us. Specifically, watching me. Every time I turned around, his silver eyes were tracking my movements. The aggressive, territorial edge of his cedar scent had softened into something warm, possessive, and deeply amused. The terrifying heir to the underworld was completely captivated by my bureaucratic meltdown. By 6:30 a.m., the sun was beginning to bleed through the gaps in the heavy steel shutters. The form was finally complete. 40 pages perfectly filled out, accompanied by a brilliantly forged medical document that Arthur had somehow procured via an encrypted fax line in the living room. I held the packet to my chest like a holy relic, a massive wave of relief washing over my exhausted body. My natural vanilla scent bloomed, sweet and content. Thank you, I breathed, looking at Hank and Arthur. They both looked significantly more drained than they had after their last gang shootout. Don't mention it, kid, Hank grumbled, rubbing his cramping hand. I grabbed my battered blue backpack and slung it over my shoulder. Okay, the administrative office opens at 7:30 a.m. If I leave right now, I can drop this off right before my midterm slot, completely secure my scholarship, and then... I reached for the door handle. Instantly, the ambient lighting in the penthouse snapped from a soft yellow to a harsh, blinding crimson. A deafening, high-pitched electronic siren ripped through the silence. Beep, beep, beep. My heart stopped. Hank and Arthur were out of their chairs in a microsecond, the academic confusion vanishing from their faces, replaced entirely by lethal, cold-blooded instinct. Their assault rifles were up and aimed at the door before I could even blink. Dominic was suddenly right behind me. He didn't gently guide me away, his massive arm hooked around my waist, violently jerking me backward and pinning my back flush against his rock-solid chest. The dark cedar scent violently exploded in the room, turning sharp, acidic, and suffocatingly territorial. Step away from the door, Liam, Dominic commanded, his voice a vibrating, demonic growl that shook my very bones. He unholstered a heavy black pistol from his waistband with his free hand. What's happening? I gasped, my fingers desperately clutching the form. My paperwork. Code red lockdown, Arthur shouted over the blaring alarm, his eyes locked on a glowing tablet mounted on the wall. Multiple unauthorized armed individuals detected in the lobby. They bypass the biometric scanners. It's the Petrovs. Nobody crosses that door, Dominic snarled, his grip tightening around my waist like an iron cage, pulling me deeper into the darkness of the bedroom. We are officially at war. I stood there, trapped against the city's most dangerous alpha, listening to the alarm shriek. A terrifying thought pierced through the haze of my impending doom. Even with a perfectly filled out Form 104B, I was absolutely going to miss my midterm. The code red siren was a relentless, ear-splitting shriek that tore through the penthouse, bathing everything in a harsh, pulsing crimson light. Outside the heavy steel door, I could hear the muffled, frantic shouts of Vance Syndicate foot soldiers mobilizing. We were under siege. Most Omegas in this situation would be paralyzed by the sheer terror of a Mafia turf war. They would bury their faces in their alpha's chest, seeking comfort in the overwhelming scent of dark cedar and the promise of violent protection. I, however, was having a full-blown academic meltdown. My midterm! I wailed, the sound muffled against Dominic's tactical vest as he kept me pinned to his chest. The doors to the lecture hall lock at exactly 8:05 a.m. Professor Higgins doesn't care about syndicate wars, Dominic. He failed a girl last semester because she was in a minor car crash. Liam, breathe, Dominic commanded. His voice was a deep, vibrating rumble intended to trigger my submissive instincts. His hand stroked the back of my neck, his pheromones spiking into a heavy, intoxicating blanket of pure alpha dominance. You are safe. I will burn this entire city to the ash before I let them touch you. I don't care about the city, I sobbed, completely immune to his alpha aura, because the sheer terror of losing my 3.8 GPA was entirely overriding my biology. I care about the 60% of my final grade that I'm currently missing. I'm going to lose my scholarship. My grandmother is going to be evicted from her care facility. My natural scent, usually a soft, comforting vanilla, had soured into something that smelled like burnt sugar and hyperventilation. I was shaking so badly my teeth were chattering. Dominic stared down at me, the ruthless heir to the underworld, looking utterly, completely lost. He was a man trained to dismantle cartels, not to handle a college student having a panic attack over a syllabus. He looked up, his silver eyes flashing with panicked fury. Fix this, Dominic snarled at his two top assassins. Make him stop crying. Hank, still aiming his assault rifle at the door, flinched. Boss, I shoot people. I don't know how to stop a college kid from crying. Do you want me to go shoot his professor? No! I shrieked, my head whipping around. If you kill him, everyone gets an incomplete for the semester. Stand down, Hank, Arthur sighed. The leaner assassin engaged the safety of his rifle and slung it over his broad, Kevlar-plated shoulder. He stepped forward, his expression completely deadpan, and pulled a black, dry erase marker from the depths of his tactical gear. I didn't even want to know why he carried office supplies next to his spare magazines. Arthur walked directly to the massive, floor-to-ceiling bulletproof window overlooking the Boston skyline. He uncapped the marker with his teeth. Bring him over here, boss, Arthur said calmly. Liam, what specific chapters does the midterm cover? I blinked, the tears freezing in my eyes. Multivariable calculus, partial derivatives, multiple integrals, and Stokes' theorem. Dominic hesitantly loosened his ironclad grip around my waist, guiding me toward the window while keeping his body positioned between me and any potential sightlines. Arthur, what the hell are you doing? I'm establishing a mock examination environment to regulate his stress hormones, Arthur replied, already drawing a flawless, complex Cartesian coordinate system on the thick glass. He turned to look at me, adjusting his wire-rimmed reading glasses. I have a master's degree in applied mathematics from MIT, Liam. I graduated summa cum laude. I stared at the heavily armed, terrifying mob hitman, my brain completely misfired. You went to MIT? Why are you in the Mafia? Arthur casually wrote out a terrifyingly long differential equation on the window. Student loans are predatory, Liam. The interest rates are criminal. Working for the Vance Syndicate offered a highly competitive starting salary, and honestly, the dental plan is exceptional. Now, find the gradient vector field of this function. For the next 45 minutes, the most surreal tutoring session in human history took place. The penthouse remained under strict lockdown. The red emergency lights pulsed. Outside the door, occasional muffled gunfire echoed through the high-end residential tower. Yet inside, Arthur was tapping the glass with the back of his marker, ruthlessly correcting my integration techniques. "You forgot the constant of integration," Arthur chided, his eyes scanning the perimeter for snipers before looking back at my math. "In the real world, forgetting plus C means your bridge collapses. Or, in our line of work, the explosive charge detonates 3 seconds early. Precision matters, Liam." Right, sorry," I muttered, aggressively scrubbing out a variable with my sleeve and rewriting it. The bizarre distraction was working perfectly. The sheer mental processing required to solve Stokes' theorem forced my panic to recede. My breathing slowed. My sour, burnt scent began to mellow, slowly blooming back into a rich, sweet, and contented vanilla that filled the room. Dominic stood a few feet away, his arms crossed over his chest. His heavy pistol was still gripped loosely in his right hand, but his storm-grey eyes were entirely fixated on me. He looked completely bewildered by the math scrawled across the glass, but as my vanilla scent washed over him, his posture relaxed. A dark, territorial pride radiated from him. He was literally paying an MIT graduate and hitman to tutor his Omega in the middle of a gang war. "Excellent," Arthur nodded, stepping back as I finished solving a particularly brutal surface integral. "Your methodology is sound. You would easily score an A on this exam. Your scholarship is safe." A massive, genuine smile broke across my face. The crushing weight of academic failure finally lifted from my shoulders. I turned around to look at Dominic, feeling a sudden intense rush of affection for this terrifying man who had just turned his luxury fortress into my personal classroom. "I did it," I breathed. "I actually understand the theorem." Dominic's lips twitched into a rare, breathtakingly handsome smile. He took a step toward me, his alpha scent reaching out to wrap around me like a warm blanket. "I told you, little Omega. I take care of what is mine." Crack. The sound was sharp, unnatural, and completely deafening. Before my brain could even process the noise, a brilliant, venomous dot of green light cut through the ambient crimson glow of the room. The laser sight danced across the differential equation Arthur had just written on the window, resting for a microsecond on the glass. Then, the floor-to-ceiling bulletproof window directly behind me violently exploded. Military-grade bulletproof glass doesn't shatter like in the movies. It doesn't burst into a million cinematic, twinkling shards. When a high-caliber, armor-piercing sniper round hits it, it screams. The deafening crack was followed by an agonizing shriek of tearing polycarbonate. The kinetic force was so violently absolute that it felt like a bomb had detonated inside Penthouse 402. I didn't even have time to blink, let alone process the green laser sight. Dominic moved with a speed that was entirely inhuman. 1 second he was standing 3 feet away, radiating proud, territorial warmth. The next, he was a blur of lethal muscle and dark fabric. He tackled me around the waist, his massive body twisting mid-air to ensure he took the brunt of the fall. We hit the mahogany floor hard, rolling until my back was pressed against the base of the king-sized bed, completely shielded by the sheer breadth of his shoulders. "Down. Stay down," Hank roared, his assault rifle already spitting a deafening burst of suppressive fire blindly towards the fractured window. The smell of cordite and burning gunpowder instantly choked the room. Arthur had dropped to a crouch, his reading glasses remarkably still intact on his face. "Armor-piercing discarding sabot," he reported clinically, eyeing the massive, spider-webbed crater in the glass. "Trajectory suggests the roof of the adjacent humanities building. Distance is approximately 1,200 yards. Dominic didn't care about the trajectory. He was entirely focused on me. He had me pinned to the floor, his massive hands gripping the sides of my face, his thumbs frantically wiping at my cheeks. His alpha pheromones had spiked to terrifying, unadulterated levels, pure burnt ozone, acidic cedar, and bloodlust. It was the scent of a predator ready to tear the world apart with his bare hands. "Liam," Dominic breathed, his voice a frantic, ragged rasp that I had never heard before. His silver eyes were wide, scanning every inch of my body for blood. "Are you hit? Tell me where you're hurt. Talk to me." I was hyperventilating, my chest heaving against his. My ears were ringing violently from Hank's gunfire, but as the initial shockwave of the impact faded, my brain didn't process the fact that I had just survived a Mafia assassination attempt. My eyes darted past Dominic's broad shoulder, landing on the mahogany desk in the centre of the room. The sniper's bullet hadn't just cracked the window. It had punched through the final layer of laminate, completely losing its lethal velocity, but retaining enough mass to ricochet like a sledgehammer. And it had ricocheted directly into my open, 10-year-old, heavily stickered laptop. The screen was blown clean off the hinges. The keyboard was a mangled, smoking crater of plastic and sparks. "No," I whispered. Dominic's eyes darkened, misinterpreting my shock. "I've got you. They missed. You're safe." "No!" I shrieked, a raw, agonizing sound tearing from my throat. I shoved violently at Dominic's chest, trying to scramble out from under him. "Liam, stay down," Dominic snarled, his grip tightening. "The shooter might still have a visual." "My laptop," I sobbed hysterically, pointing a trembling finger at the smoking wreckage on the desk. Tears of pure, unadulterated academic devastation streamed down my face. "Dominic, my laptop. The online submission portal was open. I was about to type in the answers Arthur gave me." The chaotic, blood-pumping atmosphere of the room suddenly ground to a screeching halt. Hank stopped firing. He slowly lowered his rifle, looking back at me with a bewildered expression. Arthur adjusted his glasses, squinting at the destroyed piece of hardware. Dominic froze. He looked at the smoking remains of my computer, then looked back down at me. I was openly weeping, my vanilla scent turning entirely sour and tragic. I wasn't crying because I almost got shot in the head. I was crying because a Russian syndicate hitman had just murdered my GPA. "The online portal closes at exactly 8:05 a.m., I hiccuped, clutching Dominic's tactical vest. "The autosave feature is broken. Everything is gone. My scholarship is gone. Why didn't they just shoot me? It would have been less stressful than telling my grandmother I got expelled." For a long, agonizing moment, Dominic just stared at me. The terrifying mob boss was caught in a bizarre purgatory between a lethal gang war and a college student's midterm breakdown. Then, a fundamental shift occurred. Dominic realized that the Petrov family hadn't just tried to breach his fortress. They hadn't just threatened his life. They had made his Omega cry. They had dared to interfere with the one thing I cared about most, right in front of him. The burnt cedar scent rolling off Dominic didn't fade. It mutated into something infinitely colder, darker, and absolutely terrifying. The panic in his eyes vanished, replaced by a bottomless, glacial fury. He slowly stood up, pulling me off the floor and tucking me securely behind his back. He didn't brush the glass dust off his dark trousers. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his encrypted satellite phone. His thumb hit a single speed dial button. "Victor," Dominic spoke into the receiver. His voice wasn't a yell, it was a deadly, quiet whisper that carried a promise of absolute carnage. "I want the hounds released on the Humanities building. Whoever took that shot, bring me their hands." He paused, his silver eyes locking onto the smoking, pathetic remains of my laptop. "And Victor," Dominic continued, his jaw ticking with murderous intent. "Call the logistics division. I don't care if you have to break into the Apple store on Boylston Street. I need a fully loaded MacBook Pro M3 Max, complete with a biometric security package and a hard shell case. Have it delivered to Penthouse 402 in exactly 10 minutes, or I will start executing lieutenants." He ended the call, tossing the heavy phone onto the sofa. He turned back to me, his massive hands gently cupping my tear-stained face. "You are not failing this class, Liam," Dominic swore, the absolute power of the Vance Syndicate backing his words. "I will personally buy the university and rewrite the syllabus before I let a Petrov sniper ruin your grade." I sniffled, leaning into his warm palms, a bizarre sense of comfort washing over me. Having a Mafia Don as an academic advisor was deeply unorthodox, but incredibly effective. 10 minutes, I asked softly, checking the clock on the wall. "The portal closes in 20. If the new laptop gets here, I can still log in and submit the answers." "See?" Arthur chimed in from the window, brushing glass dust off his sleeve. "Statistically speaking, you still have a 92% chance of academic success." I managed a watery smile. We were going to make it. The crisis was averted. Suddenly, the red emergency lights flickered, dimmed, and completely died, plunging the entire penthouse into absolute darkness. The subtle, constant hum of the building's central servers faded into a deafening silence. Arthur pulled a tactical flashlight from his vest, clicking it on to illuminate Dominic's furious face. "Boss," Arthur said, and for the first time, the MIT graduate actually sounded alarmed. "They didn't just cut the power. They severed the fiber optic cables in the basement. The entire residential tower is completely offline." My heart dropped into my stomach. No power meant no Wi-Fi. No Wi-Fi meant no submission portal. The real crisis hadn't even begun. The phrase "no Wi-Fi" hung in the cold, dark air of the penthouse, infinitely more terrifying to me than the sniper bullet currently lodged in the mahogany desk. Arthur's tactical flashlight cut through the pitch-black room, casting long, eerie shadows against the walls. The silence of the severed power lines was deafening. There was no hum from the refrigerator, no whir from the central air conditioning, and most importantly, no blinking green light on the high-speed router in the corner. "They severed the fiber optics," Arthur repeated, his voice maintaining that infuriatingly calm MIT graduate cadence. "And based on the 0 bars of cellular service on my encrypted device, I'd say the Petrovs have also deployed a localized signal jammer in the basement. Standard protocol before a tactical breach." I sank to my knees on the glass-covered floor. My hands gripped my hair as the absolute, soul-crushing weight of academic failure crashed over me. At exactly 7:48 a.m., a frantic, rhythmic pounding echoed on the reinforced steel door. Hank instantly raised his rifle in the dark. "Password," Hank barked. "Blood and ash," a breathless, terrified voice yelled from the hallway. "And I have the Apple product the boss demanded." Hank slid the heavy deadbolts back. A Vance Syndicate foot soldier practically tumbled into the room, drenched in sweat, holding a pristine, sealed white box like it was a live nuclear warhead. He thrust it towards Dominic and immediately scrambled back out into the hall. Dominic didn't even bother finding a knife. He ripped the thick cardboard packaging apart with his bare hands, tearing through the plastic wrap with a terrifying, primal aggression. He pulled out the sleek silver MacBook Pro M3 Max and dropped to his knees right in front of me, pressing it into my trembling hands. "Open it," Dominic ordered, his silver eyes glowing faintly in the beam of Arthur's flashlight. "Submit the exam, Liam." I flipped the screen open. The Apple logo chimed brightly, illuminating our faces in the darkness. My fingers hovered over the pristine keyboard, fueled by a desperate, fleeting spark of hope. I clicked on the Wi-Fi icon in the top right corner. Networks found. 0. The spark died. The laptop was a $3,000 paperweight. "I can't," I whispered, my voice cracking entirely. "There's no signal. The portal closes in 12 minutes, Dominic. It's over." I pulled my knees to my chest, burying my face in my arms. My natural vanilla scent, which had finally stabilized during Arthur's bizarre tutoring session, violently collapsed. It soured, twisting from a sweet, comforting aroma into the sharp, acidic tang of a college student who had just accepted that his entire future was burning to the ground. It smelled like expired yogurt, stale coffee, and pure, unadulterated despair. Dominic flinched. The sour scent hit his alpha senses like a physical blow. In the Omegaverse biology, an alpha is hardwired to protect their mate from distress. For Dominic, the terrifying mob boss who had spent 2 years manipulating the underworld to keep me safe, realizing that he was completely powerless against a digital deadline, was driving him to the edge of insanity. "Stop crying," Dominic rumbled, though his tone wasn't an order. It was a desperate, agonizing plea. He reached out, his massive hands wrapping around my shoulders, pulling my forehead against his chest. "I cannot stand that scent, Liam. It means I've failed you. I don't fail." "You didn't fail." I sobbed into his tactical vest, my tears soaking the expensive Kevlar. "The university's IT infrastructure failed." Dominic's head snapped up. His storm grey eyes locked onto Arthur. "Options. Now. How do we bypass a localized military-grade signal jammer?" Arthur adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, tapping his chin thoughtfully. "Technically speaking, boss, signal jammers operate within a limited dome-like radius. The Petrovs likely have a unit that covers a 3-block diameter, extending upward about 500 feet. To bypass it, we would need to establish a hard-line connection outside the perimeter, which would take hours, or achieve an altitude that clears the jamming canopy entirely." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Altitude?" "Yes," Arthur nodded. "If we reach an elevation of approximately 1,000 feet, we break the interference dome. From there, we would need a device capable of connecting to a secure, low-orbit satellite uplink." Dominic didn't hesitate for a microsecond. He didn't weigh the risks of leaving the secure penthouse while a sniper was still potentially aiming at the building. He just reached down, grabbed my battered blue backpack, shoved the new MacBook Pro inside, and threw the straps over his shoulder. He grabbed his encrypted satellite phone, the only device powerful enough to punch through the interference. "Flight deck," Dominic barked into the receiver, his voice a lethal, uncompromising command. "Spin up the Nightbird, maximum thrust. Have it hovering over the residential tower helipad in exactly 2 minutes." He dropped the phone and turned to me. Without a word of warning, he bent down, hooked his massive arm behind my knees and my back, and hoisted me effortlessly into the air, cradling me against his chest like a bridal carry. "Dominic, what are you doing?" I shrieked, clutching his neck to avoid falling. "We are going to the roof," Dominic declared, his alpha pheromones flaring with dark, possessive determination. "If your university requires an internet connection to pass this class, then I will personally carry you into the stratosphere to get one." Hank racked the slide of his assault rifle, a feral grin spreading across his scarred face. "Moving out. Escort formation." Arthur simply sighed, retrieving his marker from the windowsill. "Statistically, flying a helicopter into an active sniper zone is highly inadvisable, but mathematically speaking, your GPA depends on it." Dominic kicked the heavy steel door open, carrying me out of the safe room and straight into the dark, chaotic stairwell of the tower. I buried my face in his neck, the smell of dark cedar surrounding me. My Mafia Alpha wasn't mobilizing a tactical helicopter to escape a hit squad or to launch a counterattack. He was doing it to find an emergency 5G hotspot. The stairwell to the roof was a blur of concrete, emergency lights, and the heavy synchronized thud of tactical boots. Dominic didn't put me down once. He took the stairs 2 at a time, cradling me against his chest as if I weighed absolutely nothing. I clung to his broad shoulders, my battered blue backpack dangling precariously from his arm. Hank and Arthur flanked us, their assault rifles raised, sweeping every landing for potential threats. But honestly, I wasn't worried about Russian hitmen anymore. I was staring at the digital clock on Arthur's tactical watch. 7:55 a.m. 10 minutes until the portal closed. Dominic kicked the heavy steel access door to the roof open, completely taking it off its hinges. The deafening roar of twin turbine engines hit us like a physical wall. Hovering just inches above the private helipad was the Nightbird, a massive, matte black tactical helicopter that looked like it belonged in a military Black Ops documentary. Dominic ducked under the spinning rotors, shielding my body with his own, and practically threw us into the back cabin. Hank and Arthur piled in right behind us. "Go!" Dominic roared over the headset, strapping a heavy 4-point harness over my chest. "Straight up. Get us out of the jamming dome. The pilot didn't hesitate. The helicopter lurched violently, rocketing straight up into the freezing Boston morning sky. My stomach dropped into my shoes, but I immediately ripped the MacBook Pro out of my backpack and flipped it open on my lap. Altitude passing 500 feet, Arthur reported calmly, monitoring a handheld altimeter. Still within the interference zone. 7:58 a.m. Dominic knelt on the floor of the cabin right in front of me, completely ignoring his own seatbelt. He pulled out the heavy, brick-like satellite phone. His fingers flew across the keypad, accessing a restricted military-grade encrypted network. 800 feet, Arthur called out. 900. 1,000. We are clear of the jamming canopy. Connect to the network named Vance Alpha 1, Dominic ordered, holding the satellite phone up like a highly lethal Wi-Fi router. The password is my last name, uppercase, followed by your birthday. I didn't even have time to blush at the fact that this terrifying mob boss used my birthday as his master password. My shaking fingers slammed onto the pristine keyboard. The Wi-Fi icon flickered, searched, and suddenly, 3 solid black bars. I'm in, I shrieked. 8 a.m. 5 minutes. I logged into the university portal with the speed of a desperate demon. The midterm timer was flashing an angry red. I furiously typed in the answers Arthur had calculated on the bulletproof glass, translating his MIT-level genius into the little answer boxes. Partial derivative, 4xy minus 3z. Check. Gradient vector. Check. Stokes theorem application. Check. My vanilla scent was completely erratic, fluctuating between burnt sugar panic and the sweet aroma of impending victory. Dominic remained kneeling in front of me, his hands gripping my knees, his storm-grey eyes completely focused on my face. He wasn't watching the sky for enemy choppers. He was watching me conquer a digital math test. 8:04 a.m. 1 minute left. I slammed the trackpad, clicking the massive blue Submit Exam button. The screen loaded for an agonizing, torturous 2 seconds before a green banner flashed across the top. Exam submitted successfully. Grade. Pending. I stopped breathing. The laptop slid out of my hands, tumbling onto the floor of the helicopter. I fell forward, completely collapsing against Dominic's massive chest. I did it, I sobbed, a profound, soul-deep relief washing over me. My natural scent violently bloomed into the richest, sweetest vanilla imaginable. My scholarship is safe. Dominic let out a ragged breath, wrapping his arms around me and burying his face in the crook of my neck. He inhaled deeply, completely drunk on my scent. I told you, little Omega, he growled affectionately. Nobody fails you while I'm around. Boss, Hank's gritty voice crackled over the headset, completely ruining our intimate moment. He was looking out the side window, aiming his rifle at the ground far below. Victor's cleanup crew just signaled. They caught the rat who planted the jammer in the basement. They have him secured in the courtyard. Dominic's demeanor instantly snapped back from protective alpha to ruthless syndicate air. The warmth in his eyes froze over. Put us down. The helicopter descended rapidly, landing with a heavy thud in the private courtyard of the residential tower. Dominic unbuckled me, his jaw set with murderous intent. We stepped out of the chopper. Kneeling on the cobblestones, surrounded by 4 heavily armed Vance enforcers, was the traitor. He was bruised, bleeding from a cut on his cheek, and wearing a ridiculous pastel polo shirt. I froze. My jaw dropped. Chad? Chad, my supposedly beta frat boy study partner, looked up. His eyes widened in absolute terror as he saw Dominic Vance striding toward him like the angel of death. I'm sorry, Chad blubbered, spitting blood. The Petrovs paid me. They knew you were watching the Omega, Vance. They wanted me to isolate him. Dominic unholstered his pistol, the metallic clack echoing loudly. He aimed it directly at Chad's head. You brought a sniper to my territory. You cut my power. Wait! I yelled, pushing past Hank and marching directly toward the kneeling spy. I completely ignored the loaded gun in Dominic's hand. The adrenaline of the midterm had completely overridden my common sense. I stopped right in front of Chad, glaring down at him with absolute, unadulterated fury. "Are you kidding me right now?" I shrieked. Chad flinched, looking completely bewildered. "Liam, I'm a syndicate spy. I was ordered to—" "I don't care about the syndicates," I roared, throwing my hands in the air. "You skipped our study group on Tuesday. I bought you an overpriced venti matcha latte, Chad, and you didn't even text me back. You had the flashcards for Chapter 4. Hank lowered his rifle slightly, looking extremely confused. Arthur just pushed his glasses up his nose, watching the spectacle with mild academic interest. I was busy coordinating the assassination attempt," Chad stammered, entirely thrown off by my priorities. "Which is incredibly disrespectful to my academic schedule," I snapped, my vanilla scent spiking aggressively. "I had to learn Stokes' theorem from a Mafia hitman, Chad. Do you know how stressful that is? You are a terrible study partner, and you are officially kicked out of the group chat." Silence descended upon the courtyard. The terrifying Vance enforcers stared at me like I had grown a second head. I spun around, panting heavily, and looked at Dominic. The ruthless mob boss hadn't pulled the trigger. In fact, he had lowered his gun entirely. Dominic was staring at me with a look of pure, absolute, unhinged infatuation. The sight of his small, supposedly timid Omega aggressively scolding a cartel spy over study notes had completely short-circuited his brain. He looked incredibly proud and terrifyingly turned on. "Take him to the basement," Dominic ordered his men, his voice thick and low, never taking his burning silver eyes off me. "Process him. I'll deal with him later." As Chad was dragged away, still apologizing for both the assassination and the missed study session, Dominic closed the distance between us. He didn't say a word. He just grabbed my hand, his grip hot and possessive, and pulled me back toward the elevator. The crisis was officially over. The sniper was gone, the exam was submitted, and the traitor was dealt with. But as the elevator doors slid shut, enclosing just the two of us in a small, quiet space, a completely new, suffocatingly hot tension flooded the air. The Alpha had won his war. Now, he was looking at me like it was time to claim his prize. The elevator ride back up to Penthouse 402 felt infinitely longer than our tactical helicopter flight into the stratosphere. The confined steel box was absolutely saturated with Dominic's scent. The sharp, violent ozone of a Mafia turf war was rapidly fading, replaced entirely by a thick, overwhelming blanket of dark cedar and rain. He didn't speak. He just stood directly in front of me, his massive frame blocking my view of the elevator doors, his silver eyes tracking my every breath. I was still clutching the straps of my battered blue backpack like a life preserver, my vanilla scent pulsing in time with my racing heart. When the doors finally chimed open, Hank and Arthur stepped out first, but Dominic held up a single, commanding hand. "Clear the floor," Dominic ordered, his voice a low, vibrating rumble that left absolutely no room for debate. "Nobody comes within 50 feet of this door until I say otherwise." "Copy that, boss," Hank nodded, practically dragging Arthur down the hallway. Dominic guided me inside the penthouse and pushed the heavy steel door shut. The deadbolts slid into place with a definitive, echoing thud. The room was a disaster zone. The morning sun was violently streaming through the massive, spider-webbed crater in the bulletproof glass. The mahogany floor was covered in polycarbonate dust, and the shattered remains of my old laptop were still smoking slightly on the desk. It looked like the epicenter of a war. But as Dominic gently pried the blue backpack from my rigid fingers and tossed it carelessly onto the leather sofa, I realized I had never felt safer in my entire life. Dominic took a slow step toward me, forcing me to take a step back, then another. He didn't stop until the back of my knees hit the edge of the colossal king-sized bed. I sank onto the mattress, looking up at the terrifying, beautiful heir to the Boston underworld. He planted his hands on the mattress on either side of my hips, effectively caging me in. He leaned down, his face mere inches from mine. "A helicopter," Dominic murmured, his voice a dark, intoxicating purr. "I mobilized a military-grade Nightbird. breached federal airspace, and purged my own syndicate's security detail, all so you could submit a math midterm. I swallowed hard, my cheeks burning furiously. I got it in on time, so thank you. You were very supportive of my academic endeavours. Dominic let out a low, breathy chuckle that sent a shiver of pure electricity straight down my spine. I don't want to thank you, Liam. He reached up, his large, warm hands gently cupping my jaw. His thumbs stroked my cheekbones, his gaze dropping heavily to the side of my neck, right where my pulse was frantically beating against my scent glands. I told you I was playing for keeps, Dominic whispered, the lethal mafia boss melting away to reveal the fiercely possessive alpha underneath. I burned the Petrov's operations to the ground to keep you safe. I put a gun to your study partner's head, but you are still an unregistered, unmarked Omega. To the rest of the syndicates, you are a vulnerability, a prize waiting to be stolen. He leaned in closer, his hot breath ghosting over the sensitive skin of my neck. I won't allow that, he stated, his tone shifting into absolute, uncompromising command. I need the entire world to smell my scent on your skin. I need them to see my mark. I need to know that you are finally, truly, perfectly shackled to me. The implications made the room spin. In our world, an alpha's claim wasn't just a physical mark, it was a permanent, unbreakable biological bond. It meant absolute belonging. I looked at the man who had quite literally moved heaven and earth, defied snipers, and fought a localized signal jammer just to save my 3.8 GPA. My Omega instincts weren't just purring, they were screaming at me to surrender. I didn't want a choice. The golden cage was already locked, and I was holding the key. I reached up, my trembling fingers tangling in his dark hair, and gently pulled him closer. I tilted my head to the side, completely exposing my throat. Do it, I whispered into the quiet, destroyed room. Dominic let out a ragged, triumphant growl that vibrated through my entire body. He didn't hesitate. He opened his mouth and sank his teeth directly into the sensitive flesh over my scent gland. A sharp, brilliant pain flared for a fraction of a second, but it was instantly swallowed by a crashing, overwhelming tidal wave of pure alpha pheromones. It felt like being struck by lightning. The bond snapped into place with a terrifying, beautiful violence. My natural vanilla scent violently exploded, immediately intertwining and tangling with his dark cedar and rain, creating a completely new, unbreakable aroma that filled the entire penthouse. I gasped, my back arching, my hands desperately clutching at his broad shoulders as the biological reality of the claim rewrote my very existence. I could feel his heartbeat sinking with mine. I could feel his protective fury settling over my mind like a heavy, impenetrable shield. When Dominic finally pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine, both of us panting heavily. He looked down at the dark, bruised bite mark blooming on my neck with absolute, terrifying satisfaction. He gently kissed the mark, sealing the claim. Mine, Dominic whispered, the word carrying the weight of a king claiming his throne. Yours, I echoed, burying my face in his chest, completely surrounded by his heat. The next morning, the sun was bright and the penthouse was quiet. The shattered window had been temporarily boarded up by the cleanup crew while we slept. I woke up tangled in the expensive silk sheets, my head resting on Dominic's bare, heavily tattooed chest. I stretched lazily, my hand coming up to brush against the bandage covering the tender bite mark on my neck. A profound sense of peace washed over me. I wasn't just Liam the scholarship student anymore. I was the officially claimed mate of Dominic Vance. I was untouchable. If anyone in this city even looked at me wrong, Dominic would probably drop a building on them. I was the safest, most powerful college student in North America. I smiled, snuggling deeper into the absolute comfort of my alpha's arms. Everything was perfect. The Mafia war was over. The math midterm was done. Suddenly, my eyes snapped open. The peaceful vanilla cedar scent in the room hitched, souring just a tiny fraction. I sat bolt upright in bed, the silk sheets falling to my waist. Dominic stirred immediately, his alpha instincts waking him up the second my stress levels slightly elevated. He sat up, his silver eyes scanning the room for threats, his hand automatically reaching for the pistol on the nightstand. "Liam?" Dominic rasped, his voice thick with sleep and instant concern. "What is it? Did the perimeter alarm trip?" I stared blankly at the wall, my breathing suddenly shallow. "Dominic," I whispered, the pure horror returning to my voice. "What day is it?" Dominic blinked, the gun lowering slightly. "It's Friday." "Oh my God," I gasped, clutching my hair. "Oh my God, Friday. Today is Friday." Dominic shifted closer, wrapping a reassuring arm around my waist. "Yes, it's Friday. The Petrovs are exiled. You are safe. What is wrong?" I turned to look at the terrifying mob boss, tears of fresh academic panic already welling in my eyes. "I have a 10-page essay on cellular mitosis due at midnight for my advanced biology class," I shrieked, scrambling out of the bed. "I haven't even started the research. The library is closed because of the campus lockdown you ordered. Dominic, I don't have the textbook." Dominic Vance, the undisputed apex predator of Boston, simply stared at me for a long, exhausting moment. He looked at the ceiling, letting out a deep, world-weary sigh that spoke volumes of his new life. He didn't argue. He didn't tell me to drop the class. He just calmly reached over to the nightstand, picked up his encrypted satellite phone, and hit speed dial. "Hank," Dominic said flatly into the receiver. "Get the armoured SUV. Go to the campus bookstore. I need everything they have on cellular mitosis." He paused, watching me frantically tear through my blue backpack for a syllabus. "Yes, Hank, biology," Dominic sighed, rubbing his temples. "Just buy the whole damn science section. And bring a gun."